Well, we're open to inviting anyone from any company, but of course our
You'll
first
take
guest.
anyone.
Our first guest
I feel so
has
special.
to. Our first guest has to be our marvelous CEO, Iain McNeil. Iain, welcome.
Thank you, Marco. I brought the fanboys.
Yeah, you brought fanboys. Iain, you've been working. Of course, you started Slitherine, so 25 years. You started as an indie developer, and you've been now in charge of the company for 25 years. And I guess that. What's the difference between being in charge of a four guys development team and a much bigger company now?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely different, obviously. So back then, there wasn't really anything to be in charge of. So I was a designer, we had a programmer, artist. The three of us were making a game, and it took us about 2 years to do it. So it was much more about actually being close to development, making design decisions, development decisions, all those kind of things. And over the years, that's transitioned into, as the team got bigger, there's more distance between you and the games. So the kind of decisions you're making are in some ways more impactful, but in other ways, you're more distanced. You can't take that fine control. You're kind of exerting control through people. So it can be frustrating at times. So if you have an idea of what you want to happen, because I used to be a designer, used to be so close to the game, I had really clear ideas of what I wanted. And when you're no longer that designer, you have to try and get those views across to people, but also have to remember it's now their game, their vision. So you're giving input and feedback. You're no longer in direct control of that kind of thing.
And it's interesting because during your career, you're still very young, but you're long career. You weren't always in charge, right? So at some point, you were an executive producer, or external producer.
Yes, yeah. So
and that was on big games like Deus Ex, for instance. So, but
yeah, that was back before Slitherine. So when I was at Eidos, I was an external producer. So I started out at a company called Intelligent Games, where I was developing, but I was a fairly junior member of the team to start with, and then worked my way up through that. And then joined Eidos as an external producer because it sounded very exotic and interesting. And that's where I first found that distance. I was no longer in the team. I was a representative of the publisher working with the game development team, and they had their own ideas and their own views. And I came from, I wasn't ready for that yet, so I was giving input as if I was the internal producer running the game or the designer. And that led to me working with Pyro, I think, for a week before they asked for me to be removed. So yeah, on Praetorians, I think I lasted a week on that, giving them lots of feedback and ideas and thinking I was being very helpful, and them asking for me to be removed because they didn't want to hear all of my ideas.
So you made a lot of enemies then.
It's all right, they don't exist anymore.
All right, okay. Well, I guess that was was a strategy game. So you had more to say, or was it?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I'm a gamer, but I'm really a strategy gamer. So I don't have experience and really views and ideas on other genres to the same level. And so most of what I was doing at Eidos was things like Deus Ex, so very different kinds of games. It's like kind of, you've got characters you're controlling, and it's more actiony, urban chaos.
Great game, by the way.
And also, when you're working as an external producer, a lot of what you're doing is logistics and management. So you're doing organizing beta tests, you're organizing localization. The development team don't really want your input that much on ideas about the game, and so I found that quite frustrating, and so that's why I only lasted a year at Eidos and then left and started Slitherine, actually with one of the developers we were working with at the time.
You did start with strategy though, so sort of a natural evolution of your passion at Intelligent Games. What was it like? You started because it's your passion, but you're very junior in the team. So what kind of input did you sort of contribute there?
Back at the start, when I joined Intelligent Games, I was a tester. So I was playing the games, giving feedback. And it was actually through Phil, who's now technical director here. He was the lead programmer on, I think, technical director at some point at Intelligent Games, and I got the job through him. because it never occurred to me, I played games, but it never occurred to me that someone actually has a job making the games. If it had, I'd have probably studied different things at university. So I accidentally got into it. And yeah, so you're starting off with very little control. I don't know anything about the industry. I'm just telling people what I think. I think Ticonderoga was my very first game, and then on to some others like Simile or...
Yeah, that's interesting because you studied environmental science, right? And
I did.
And then you ended up doing a Simile
relevant.
game.
Well, that's true, yeah. That's the closest connection to using anything from my degree I've done since I left university. But yeah, what I studied was nothing really to do with the job, and it's everything to do with my job was to do with my hobby. So I've been wargaming since I was 6. So my dad took me first time to the Wargames Club when I was 6, and they wouldn't let me touch the soldiers, so this was tabletop wargames. So the only thing I was allowed to touch was dice back then. And then after, I don't know when, it must a couple of years later, they must have let me start touching the figures. And then at 11, I was club champion, so that annoyed them.
You keep annoying people, Iain.
Yes, I have a habit of doing that. That's why you don't let me talk to people.
At Intelligent Games, people don't remember, but you were working on stuff like Red Alert, Dune 2000. Then you went on to Eidos, work on Deus Ex and so on. And it's all like games that we all remember, and they are old and they're part of the legacy, right? And it's almost become iconic.
It doesn't feel like that long ago, but yeah, I still remember. Red Alert mission discs. I remember the editor we used to build the maps on. So we were building lots of multiplayer maps for Westwood Studios for Red Alert, the first game, and then on to June 2000. Doing a lot of, we did the entire project for that one, so that was entire from scratch, and that was a hard project. Working with Westwood, they had very firm ideas of how a real-time strategy game should work, and they were doing what I did to Pyro, and we had massive fights with them about balancing, and one day we came into the office and they just changed all the data files and rebalanced everything. So the game played completely differently, and they said you've got to use the data files that we've provided, and so
you didn't get them removed though.
No, they were paying us lots of money, so I couldn't.
Okay, that makes sense. Do you still think that the industry is able to deliver iconic games like these ones? These were pioneering years, right? So
it's really hard to judge because personally, I don't feel like there've been any civilization type moments or command and conquer type moments in the last kind of 10, 15 years. But it's really hard to judge because we've seen so many games and we've been exposed to so many different gameplay types. Younger people coming into the industry now may still be having those moments of, wow, this is completely new to me. So I think it's difficult for us to judge that because I think it's the same with every generation with things like music, films. The older generation always thinks that there's no new good stuff coming on, no originality, and then the next generation coming through thinks that their generation is the most original. So I don't know, time will tell, I guess.
Maybe, but still, modern music is shitty, right? So I couldn't help myself. You've got like, one of the things I always admire of especially on seeing you work, is that you're able to see the potential of a game, even if a game is just like blocks and awful graphics, and you're really able to see the loop and appreciate it. Is it your designer? Is it like a natural inclination? Was it?
I think it's a mixture. I think it's it's a natural skill, whatever you want to call it. Not useful in many ways, but is useful in gaming. And it's just an exposure to so many different games. I've been playing so many games since such a young age. I'm so used to looking at different mechanics. The only downside is that up until I started working in games, I really, really enjoyed games just for the experience. And once you start working in games, you find yourself always analyzing them. So every time I play a game now, I'm looking at the mechanics, looking at the systems, breaking it down into components, what ideas could be used or borrow, and all that kind of thing. So it's not as enjoyable as a hobby anymore, but it's still fun as a job. It's just, it's changed. And I particularly like elegant gameplay mechanics. I don't like really complex games where there's lots of special rules and special things. I like it where there's a nice system where you get elegant, deep gameplay from the kind of the core design system, and that's really hard to do.
Can you name games with that sort of fascinating for you, or?
That you should have warned me about this.
You can think about it a bit.
I mean, things like Civilization, whilst it is a complex game, at its heart, it has a city mechanic where you place a city on a terrain tile, and that city harvests the terrain around it with the population units, and there's this balance of how many tiles you can manage versus the population, keeping it happy, and then adding the military things on top of it. It starts with a really elegant central loop, and it just layered things on top of it.
That's cool. I think that almost like, I guess, design-wise, that's good advice. But then you've got like start having business parts of the equation coming to play, and then people are like, ooh, we should be adding this, and it's games are about content these days and less about the core, is it, or?
I'm not sure. I think that people are looking for an interesting experience, and it doesn't have to be huge. It has to be a really good, tight gameplay loop. And if they like it, they want to be able to play it for a long time. So you populate it with content, or you make it replayable in ways, so procedural content or replay value, those kind of things. So when people are buying games, they want to think that they could be playing this game for the next 10, 15 years. The reality is, if you look at the stats, most people will play a game for 20, 30 hours and move on to the next one, but they won't buy it unless they feel like they could be playing it for hundreds and hundreds of hours. So I think there's still that tight gameplay loop, I think, is still really important, but there's a lot more expectation on user interface and graphics these days as well. Things we could have kind of got away with in the past, where we didn't put as much effort into those things. The audience is now much more discerning, and expectations are much higher than they used to be.
There's one thing, back when, maybe 10, 15 years ago, if you didn't have, for instance, multiplayer in your game, nobody would play multiplayer. But if you didn't have multiplayer in a game, press would kill you and customers would kill you.
I remember because of the times we had, because back in the day when you're doing retail, on the back of the box, you needed to have that multiplayer box, like that checkbox. And in the games, we had to shoehorn multiplayer into, knowing that no one was going to use it. And we actually tracked the stats on one of them. I think it was at Great Battles Medieval. I think we looked at the stats, and something like 10 people had played it multiplayer. But we had spent months and months and masses of money and time getting that feature in, because we needed it, because the retail and the publishers wanted it so that they could sell it to people.
Do you think there are elements like that today that are, you need to have that? Nobody wants it, but it's like, I'm thinking about, like, for instance, look at the Steam Deck, figures, very few people play Steam Deck, but you really have your Steam Deck compatibility, or like back in the days it was like, do you have a Mac version? No, we don't. It's very hard to make. So
I think it really, for me, the thing that I see in common is people want to think they can play this game forever. So I was saying before, they don't actually play it for that long, but they want to think that they could if they wanted to.
All right.
That's the thing I find in common. People want replay value. They want to feel like this game is supported. They won't buy a game, no matter how good it is. They rarely buy a game if it's not being supported, and they think that the title is dead. So it's strange how much people care about that.
Right, Iain. To finish this interview, I have 5 quick-fire questions.
Uh-oh.
You're having, you can't think about it, right? So just go for it. It's not embarrassing, but you'll be.
Remember, you got me up at 4:30 this morning. And I forgot my glasses, so I had to ring the doorbell and wake Louisa up, so she was not impressed.
Alrighty, so ready?
Ready.
One thing you love about the gaming industry?
The people.
Favorite strategy game to play on the go?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. I don't really play strategy games on the go.
Right.
I only really enjoy them if I'm at a PC, and if it was that, it would be Civilization.
Squares or hexes?
Hexes. What kind of question is that?
Well, ask Richard Bolly Scott. One thing you hate about the gaming industry?
Toxic communities.
Why are turn-based games better than RTSs?
I used to really love RTSs because my reactions were better. Now, if I play an RTS, I get slaughtered. So for now, turn-based games give you that time to think.
Iain, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you later on some call or something. Who knows? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Marco.